Witch in Charm's Way, a cozy mystery audiobook, written and narrated by R.K. Dreaming. Part 45. Chapter 23. An Ending. I slept peacefully that night. Sort of. It still took me a long while to drop off, my body still wanting to stay awake in the nighttime hours. But I was determined more than ever to stick to the routine of a normal person, because that's who I was, because that's who I was determined to be again. When I woke up the following morning, the first thing my brain thought of was sunscreen. In a panic, I looked towards the curtains. The slightest crack was in the middle of them, and a bright line of sunlight had splayed over my duvet. My heartbeat started racing until I suddenly realized that I didn't have to worry about it anymore, or at least I hoped not. I stretched out my hand tentatively towards that ray of sun, and I watched it play over my skin. It didn't do anything. No burning, no pain. The spell was holding strong. It was reflecting all the sunlight away from me. And the best part was the enchantment was entirely invisible. I looked entirely normal. I was filled with a newfound elation. Feeling immediately bouncy and cheery, I sprang out of bed and ripped the curtains open. Light flooded in. The world outside was big and bright and full of possibility. "Yow!" I said, punching my fist into the air. I could see the garden and the line of trees in the distance, beyond which was the cliff and the beach, and oh, how I wanted to go down to it. And I could. Nothing could stop me. I flung both my arms into the air. "Oh, what a beautiful morning!" I found myself spontaneously singing out loud, and then laughed at myself. When I went into the bathroom, I was so excited about not having to spend all that time drenching myself in sunblock and rubbing it in. My supply of it was nearly finished, but it no longer mattered. I wouldn't have to go into town like a criminal during the hours of darkness and stock up on a huge stash and worry that the shop assistant was making note of my guilty purchase. By the time I went downstairs, I was humming to myself. "If you say, come with me down to Brimstone Bay beach." I was hoping that Aunt Adele would indulge me with a late brunch. I was filled with energy. I didn't need Captain Villain here to tell me that Lily's spirit had been laid to rest. I felt it in my heart that it had to be true. I had felt it when I saw that horrible guilt fade away from Oberon's tortured face. He was at peace now too, and I had helped make that happen. I arrived into the kitchen to find Aunt Adele already whipping up a fresh batch of cakes, and she wasn't alone. Greedy was following her around, peering over her shoulder and dipping her poltergeist finger into the various batters and icings, making Aunt Adele slap her hand away at intervals. "But I just want to look," Greedy protested. "Look with your eyes, not with your fingers," insisted Aunt Adele. I chuckled. So did Jasper and Allegra, who were sitting at the kitchen table, drinking cups of tea. "What are you two doing here?" I said, my voice high with excitement. Allegra patted a large picnic basket sitting on the table between them. "It's time for that picnic we said we would do. Now that you're up out of bed, lazy bones." She smiled at me. It was our little secret. She knew why I was out of bed so late. She knew now why it was hard for me to sleep at nights. And she knew why I hadn't been able to go out to the picnic last time that I had been asked. It warmed my heart that she knew my secret, and she was smiling at me anyway. Jasper was looking curiously back and forth between the two of us. "What?" he he complained. I don't like this cousinly secret glances being exchanged thing. It's making me paranoid. What's going on? Wouldn't you like to know? Said Allegra, throwing him an arch look. I would. That's why I asked, he retorted, and tweaked her nose. She squealed, looking horrified. He laughed. I sat down in the chair next to him, right in the sunny spot I had always avoided. Leaning in close, I crooned into his ear in a husky voice. If you really must know about our secret, last night Allegra and I had the most interesting conversation. She leaned over to take hold of his hand lovingly in both of hers. She nodded at him intensely. We think you're so magnificently wonderful, she purred at him. I threw my arms around him. We think you're the most delicious man that ever lived. And I know that I told you this picnic was a surprise for Esme, purred Allegra. But actually it's a surprise for you. We've decided we are going to share you. Share me, he croaked. And then a gleam came into his eyes. Yeah, you can share me. I burst into laughter and slapped him on the shoulder. You wish, I said. Young love, trilled Aunt Adele, floating over to pour a cup of tea for me. Isn't it wonderful? She clasped her hands together and tilted her head and gazed at the three of us longingly. Don't even think about it, I said to her. No more matchmaking, Aunt Adele. Promise me. She sniffed. I will promise no such thing. She went away to tend to her cake batters again. Greedy had floated over and was looking at us with great interest. Last night, Aunt Adele and Primrose had both had a word with Greedy about letting Lorcan into the castle. Greedy had been tearful, saying it was before she'd even met me, and that he'd duped her. She'd had no idea what he'd been up to, and promised to not do it again. Primrose had taken it as a personal affront, and had promised to keep a closer eye on her. Greedy seemed to have forgotten all about her tears of the previous night. So, who likes who then? She asked excitedly, bouncing on her toes. Which of you three is going to have a fairy tale romance? She pointed at Jasper. I know that you're definitely one, but which of these two lovely ladies are you going to pick? None of us, I said briskly. Men don't pick us Westbrim ladies. We pick the men. Darn right, said Allegra, standing up. She scooped up the basket and glared at Jasper when he tried to take it from her. Hey, I'm carrying a basket here. Yes, ma'am, he said, holding his hands up in the air. As we followed Allegra out of the kitchen, Jasper asked me, how did you know it was all of them? No questions until we get to the beach, said Allegra firmly. Oh, come on, he said. I've already asked this one. Okay then, she agreed. I chuckled at her bossiness. It's because they were all sneaking around the house, I explained. First, Captain Villain said that he saw Lorcan Hardwick in the house in the middle of the night, and then I found Paolo wandering around, pretending that he'd been looking for the toilets. And then Petra fell on top of the murder weapon and wiped the prints off. And suddenly, when we were in that interview room, I just thought it has to be all of them. They have to all have been in on it together. Huh, said Jasper, looking a bit put out. I never thought of that. It's because you, Mr. Handsome, don't have Esme's brains, said Allegra proudly. Did you just call me Mr. Handsome? He asked, grinning widely. No, she said. If you had been listening properly, you would have heard that I was saying that Esme has the best brains. So long as you admit that I've got the best brawns, he retorted. She snorted. You are so full of yourself. We headed out through the cafe, which was empty for now, but which would be filling up to the brim within the next couple of hours, just the way Aunt Adele liked it. We got outside to see Agent Constantine walking up the path. I stared at him in surprise. Hi, you've reached the end. Comment the code words. Thanks a bunch for that cliffhanger, to confuse everyone who hasn't reached this part of the story yet. And thanks for playing along.